Welcome to the Right Hand Roadmap, the podcast for seconds in command of founder-led companies. I'm your host, Megan Long, owner of Second First. In each episode, we show you the path to success on your journey as the number 2 leader in entrepreneurial companies. I am so happy you are here. Today, we're talking with Amy Stasiukaitis, Chief Matriarch. She is the Chief of Staff at Low County Case Millwork in Charleston, South Carolina, where her husband is the CEO. She is also the founder of the Helm, an impactful community for executive mothers who don't want to choose between ambitions and motherhood. She has won many professional awards and is someone that actively advocates for being able to have it all: success in family, relationships, and career. I am thrilled to introduce you to her as we talk about being second in command to a spouse and balancing parenthood and career ambitions. Amy, I am so excited you are here.
I'm so excited for this collaboration and conversation to happen. I've been looking forward to it.
Oh, it is a long time coming. Amy and I first met, we slid in each other's DMs on Instagram, right?
Yes, very much so. I knew that we were meant to be friends, meant to collaborate, and it's just all coming to fruition. So it's super cool.
And so you are Chief of Staff right now. Give us a little bit of an overview real quick of what your role is.
So I'm Chief of Staff at Low Country Case Millwork. My main responsibility is our people strategy. Basically, David says, our CEO, also my husband, says, this is what needs to happen. This is the direction we need to take. And I kind of align the people, the resources that they need all in place to make that happen. My initial role here was more finance focused. So I also serve as the head of finance. So I also oversee all of our financial strategy as well. So it's definitely a juxtaposition of responsibilities, but I make sure the people are in place, the money is in place, and then we just hit the ground running.
Where do you see the title Chief of Staff differentiating from maybe like a COO or something like that?
It's viewing people as a huge resource for your business. And it's being that middle person between the CEO and the people who are boots on their ground. It's just an extra layer, an extra defensive layer, but also an extra offensive layer of really pushing forward his ideas, making sure strategies followed up on, initiatives are happening. But it's just all viewing people as your greatest asset, your greatest resource, and utilizing them to their fullest potential.
Okay, you mentioned briefly, but I want to dig into this. Your CEO that you are kind of in that second in command seat to is your spouse. Have you always worked together? When did you start working in the company together?
So to preface, everyone thinks we're crazy. And it's also the first question that everyone asks is, I have no idea how you work with your spouse full time. And my first response is always, it's all we've ever known. So we're those weirdos who were almost high school sweethearts. I was graduating high school, went to the same college. He was already working in the business and they needed someone to come in and do some admin work. So I jumped in. David jokes that it was his test to see if I was actually going to be able to withstand what his life was going to look like. Obviously, I withstood the test and I just jumped in and was like, this needs fixing, let's do this and this and this. Jumped in full force. We always like to say, I wouldn't trust anybody else with my livelihood. So we're the perfect match for what we need.
So do you talk to other duos that are either co-founders or?
No, it's very unique. And it's also really hard when we go out externally in the public. Everyone thinks when we're like, oh, this is my husband. And they think he's just my husband, or, oh, this is my wife. And they think I'm just at an event as his wife or partner. And no, but we're actually fully functioning operational roles in the business too. So it's a really hard dynamic for people to understand. There's lots of questions that come along with it, but it works for us.
What rules do you both have that you have found work for you, either at home or in the office? Because I imagine there has to be some separation.
We actually take the spicy take of no, that we don't try to separate both. It takes more energy to compartmentalize the two than to just act as it is all as one. I'm big on teaching leaders to show up holistically to all the roles. Compartmentalization takes effort. And if you're spending energy on trying to keep them separate, then you're not using that energy to show up as the most impactful version of yourself, if that makes sense. So we don't separate. When we walk in the door, we know exactly what the other one is carrying from the day. When we walk into the office, we know exactly how many hours of sleep we didn't get because we were battling kids at home. We don't try to hide it. It's all mixed into one. The rules that we operate by, I laugh, it's like Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is that we don't talk about the Fight Club. The first rule of working with your spouse is there are no rules. Lots of forgiveness, lots of grace. It's just a constant learning experience, and just being really flexible and agile and giving each other, not only giving each other grace, but giving ourselves grace as well. When I talk about showing up holistically, a great example is we don't operate by rules in our relationship, in our family, in our organization. We operate by core values that are like the bumpers. And everyone always thinks of core values as a business, an organizational tool or theory. But really, you should have core values for your family too. The number one we always say is Stasiukaitis is do things right. We always do things right. We do the right thing. That core value at work is we have integrity. We operate with integrity. We do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But when we make decisions, we ask each other, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing this right? Are we giving it our best effort? And that decision would be the same if we were sitting at our desk with our team, or if we were sitting around our kitchen table with our kids. Another one is Stasiukaitis are the nicest people in the room. That's another one. That's definitely helpful with parenting. But at our organization, we're a team at Low Country. We're nice. We take care of people. We support one each other. The team, the family, that's the most important one. And we're going to take care of them. We're going to be the nicest one in the room. So by having those core values, there are bumpers, there are guardrails that keep us in line. So if we make a decision at home, it's not going to contradict what we need to do in our workplace as well.
Do those core values that you use with your family, and I know that you said that you don't really have a firewall, you don't really have compartmentalized two lives, but do those core values help maybe the work stress from bleeding in too much to family life? Or if there's something going on during the day with the team or with clients or whatever, I think one of the biggest issues just in either second first members that work with their spouse or coaching clients of mine isn't always in the office. It's how do we not talk about this until the last moment before we go to bed? How can we actually enjoy our relationship and not have to be talking about the line of credit at 11 p.m.?
I think that comes along with being really intentional about your schedule too. No, we're not going to forbid the conversation from coming into the household. But if we have a standard meeting at 3 p.m. on Thursday to dump everything, talk about it all, it's less likely that at Thursday at 7 p.m. when we're sitting at dinner with our kids that we're going to talk about it. So I think leaving space for it, leaving time for it, be intentional with your schedule to make sure that those conversations still have a place to live. And then you can really save this other space for family time. And that's how you compartmentalize through your schedule, not by the role you're showing up in or the place you're showing up with.
What is a mistake that you see seconds in command making when working with either their CEO or their visionary?
For spouses in that role as a second in command, when they forget that they also are serving an organization. So we view our company as a living, breathing organism. And yes, when I walk in and show up holistically, I am David's wife. We are married. We are a spouse. But at the same time, my role that I'm showing up with showing up in is the chief of staff. And I have a duty and a responsibility to the organization as well. And I hold myself, and we all have to hold ourselves to a really high standard of excellence in that role. And we can't let our double role of being the spouse, being the partner, get in the way of what we have to do to have a healthy, functioning organization. And if we don't uphold that standard of excellence to that role, then it's unfair to our teams. It's unfair to our CEO, which is also unfair to our partner or our spouse. And it really does a huge disservice to the entire organization as a whole. So I think forgetting that when you both choose to work in the business together, you are taking two vital roles from the company. And you have to show up as if that is your only role. And you have to do just as good a job as if you weren't related. If you were hired by the organization to do the job, you have to do just as good of a job for that organization, or it's going to set everyone up for failure.
One of the strengths that I think is really appreciated of a second in command is the ability to almost challenge a CEO or be a thought partner and an advisor or someone that's not just the yes man to help them think of things that they might not see in the organization because you see every part that they might not. And I always am concerned that that dynamic might get lost because you don't want to challenge your spouse or you don't want to not show up as a united front if you're not having that strict firewall.
I think if you change the way you view it a little bit. So instead of looking at it like you are challenging their leadership, look at it as like you're filling in the gaps. So what is an advantage of being a second in command to your partner or your spouse is that you know your CEO intimately. You know their strengths and you have to know deeply their weaknesses as well, which typically you do if you're in a long-term relationship. But when you know those strengths and those weaknesses, you can fill in those gaps with you. So David and I, for example, we operate off the DISC, the framework. It's a behavioral assessment. A lot of people do know. David and I are both in the southern hemisphere of the DISC circle. So we're both very cautious. We're very reserved. We like stability. We both hide it very well because we're very familiar with what our weak points are. When you're a leadership team, it takes a well-rounded leader who can stretch into all four quadrants of the DISC circle. We both are very aware that we both have weaknesses and are going to have blind spots and are going to make decisions that are very guarded because it's harder for us to live in the northern hemisphere. We don't like taking action. We don't like being direct. We don't like being enthusiastic. It's very hard for us.
This is shocking for me.
It's very shocking.
You wear a D mask like I have never seen anyone wear a D mask before.
That's a huge compliment for me because it's very hard. So on DISC, just by the way, I am an S, as an S can get, which is very supportive, prioritizes stability and collaboration. I do not like challenge. I do not like confrontation. Takes every ounce of me to stretch across to the D. So David is very similar, which is very hard as a leadership team. But we know we need to live in the northern hemisphere every now and then. For me, it's easier for me to get up to that northern hemisphere and be the enthusiastic one, to be the outspoken one, to be the encouraging one, the outgoing one. It's easier for me to fill that gap in our leadership. For him, it's easier for him to be the direct, confrontational, results, action-driven. So that's how we push each other, is that we know what's the easier push for one another and kind of stretch that way. So I think what's important is that you deeply know what your spouse, what your partner, what your CEO, what they struggle with, and leaning into how you can fill that gap versus thinking it as challenging their leadership.
That makes a lot of sense. And have you then purposefully kept that in mind as you filled in other seats at your leadership table?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We know which styles we need, what seats. So we are a commercial cabinetry company. We manufacture and install the product. Our installers are high eyes. They're like your football team. They're like, rah, rah, let's go. Let's get this done. Go team. They need lots of gold stars and enthusiasm and encouragement. David and I aren't great at that. So our head of installation is really great at that. And he sits at our leadership table, and we know when we lean into him when we need to encourage people. We also have just recently, just a side note, have been working with Patrick Lencioni's Working Genius. It's our unit that we're studying all year with our team. And that's a really good one too. Making sure your leadership table fills in the gaps for each other, because you have to have all different styles.
I love that.
Wow.
You mentioned that you started at the company doing some admin work and then I imagine quickly grew into like the chief of staff position and the leadership role. Was there any one moment that was a big moment of growth between you two working in the business, or a big learning experience of how you partner up together professionally?
Definitely. So David is a G2 business owner. So his dad started the company in 1990. David and I jumped in about the same time, full-time, 2007, 2008. And it took about 8 to 10 years to really fully transition the leadership to David and I. There was a very specific moment, an argument, a hot point of contention that I remember between David and his dad. I think it was regarding end-of-year bonus strategy. And I was sitting back. I had taken a passive role, letting them navigate that transition together. And David's father was really drilling into David. And I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, we were married at this point, thinking to myself, no, David and I are a team. If we're going to do this, we have to have each other's back. And I stood up and I said to my father-in-law, who is a very powerful D personality, by the way, and I said, you're not going to speak to him like that. He is a leader in this company. And he spotted back at me and he said, and I said, and he's my husband and we're a team and you're not going to speak to him that way. And he spotted back to me and he said, well, he's my son. I said, well, he's my husband and we are a leadership team here and we need to be united on how we lead. And that moment was a really distinct moment. It was, number one, it was very hard for me, but it was the moment when we realized that we have to have each other's back all the time. And we, as difficult as it is to sometimes get to common ground and an agreed consensus, even between just the two of us, for our team, for the organization, we have to be a united front. And that was a moment that we really learned that together. I could speak for hours on succession planning and leadership transitions between generational family-owned businesses, because it's definitely a journey. And that's something, as the second in command, as the chief of staff, being the mediator and being the middle person between G1 and G2 has been a huge, I've been a huge asset to that, like using emotional intelligence to see both sides of it. And I think that's important as a second in command, is that they're such great mediators. They're that middleman, and utilizing your skills to see both sides, to present it without bias to both parties. It's such a huge, important role of being that second in command.
Was there a big change in vision between David's father and David that you navigated as well?
Huge difference in leadership style and vision. The biggest change with the vision is how David and I have built and curated a culture here. It's construction industry too. So historically, culture has been very harsh or non-existent in construction industry. So throwing in this word of culture and team and retaining a team and all these different initiatives we do, that was very foreign. But that was something that David and I, specifically around like the 2019 timeframe, we had really hard life moments happen to us. We went through a really hard family tragedy, quite honestly. And that shifted our mindset around, we wanted to show up to work and we wanted it to be meaningful and we wanted to enjoy the people we were around and we wanted people to want to come to be at work with us. So that shift in the culture was probably the biggest vision change between the two of them.
I have another question around just being a parent as well, because when you both are in such high level positions, basically running this, what I'll call high growth company, because I think it is, and you also have the same children, the same children's schedules, how does working together in the business impact parenthood as well?
It's a really tough decision. Kids of, I get emotional talking about it, kids of entrepreneurs and business owners, they can easily get dealt the short end of the stick and they don't choose that. Something we're very aware of with our kids is that they didn't choose this lifestyle. So number one, always making sure they see the benefits as well as the hardships too. They sacrifice a lot of time with their mom and dad. So making sure they also reap the benefits and see the great things about having their own business, the great things about having 60 people on their team. It's not like they work for us. They have a team of built-in people who would walk in front of a bus for them. My little 4-year-old dude, Mac, knows every person's name of the 60 people here because he's grown up here. It's way more difficult to do that. By the way, it's really hard to work with a 4-year-old in your office. But that's the strategy that we chose. The other really important thing is that when both of you are choosing to work in the business, there is a huge part of responsibility at home that is not going to get the attention. A lot of family-owned businesses, there's one spouse, one partner, one parent that works in the business and carries the business load. And then there's another spouse that works in the home and carries an equal load that is just as important, just as impactful, just as much raising leaders in the home. So when you choose to both be in the business, you have to figure out how the home load still gets carried and carried well, and how your leaders in your home, your little leaders, still have positive influence and are taken care of. So we have been really great about not only building a really high-performing team within our organization, we have to build a really high-performing team at home too. And we have to ask for a lot of help there. And that is so important for entrepreneurial couples to realize you can't do it alone. And building a team for your household and your children is just as important. So I am very, very open about the fact that we have a nanny that works 32 hours a week. She is super high performing. I send her an email every Sunday night with the schedule of the week, the priorities for the kids, what they need to be doing, the meals, everything. I lead her, my nanny, for my kids, just as I would lead a team member in our organization. We hired an executive assistant, David and I, that flows back and forth between business and personal. We use Instacart for our groceries. We have a yard guy. We don't like to say any of that. We have a cleaning lady that comes every week. We would love to do it all on our own. It doesn't feel great to say that we don't do all of those things. But if you're choosing to be high performing in your work, you have to take care of home too, because it's just as important. And you have to make sure those resources are in place for that as well.
I'm so thankful that you were open about that piece. Just last night, I was at my book club, which is all women entrepreneurs. And people were joking, man, I wish I had a wife. Where can I get a wife? Because to your point, you can't expect to be able to manage it all and execute it all and have it all taken care of. So figuring out what can I outsource? And it doesn't have to be all of the housework either. It's whatever gives you the most fulfillment.
I had a mentor tell me that your time, specifically around housework and those little chores and shopping at the grocery store, little things that a lot of people have shame when they farm that out and outsource that. The time that you are spending doing those things, your time is so much more impactful spending that with your kids. Spending your value, you are so much more valuable than doing those little errands. You can use your time in so much better places, whether that's in your organization or whether that's reading to your kids and teaching them leadership skills. That is so important. So why would you waste your most valuable resource doing things that aren't going to make as big of an impact?
Man, you have already shared so many great tips and takeaways for anyone in this position. Are there any other pieces of advice you have for seconds in command? And it could be those working with their spouse. It could be just period, based on your experience, looking to grow or mature their business this year.
I think something that I have struggled with because the second in command role, number one, thank you to you, Megan, for really solidifying the importance and saving the space for this type of role and these type of conversations for second in command. I struggle for years questioning my value in the organization because it is such an ambiguous position. Because our metrics of success aren't very clear. Our KPIs look a little different. It's really hard to measure. We live in the gray area. Our days change so often, and our responsibilities look very different. It's not easy as a checklist. Our job description isn't very clear. But know that your work as a second in command matters. It's just as impactful to the organization as someone who contributes to the cost of goods sold, that's contributing direct to the product and the production. It's just as impactful, if not more impactful. So take that to heart and invest in yourself. Give yourself the resources you need, the team you need, whether that's the team that you're building at your home or within your organization, but make sure you're taking care of you because your work really matters. And there would be a huge gap in the organization if it weren't for you as second in command.
Amen. Close the book. That's it. That's all anyone needs to hear. Oh my gosh, that is so well said. Thank you. And thank you for, I think, echoing what a lot of people feel. One of my one-on-one coaching clients that I work with, she has successfully built this team around her. She has such a high-performing leadership team now. She has gotten herself out of every other seat on the org chart. She is just the VP number 2 now. And she's like, I don't know what value I'm bringing to the company anymore because
hard.
I'm not actually like
Doing the work.
thing. Right.
Yes.
So once you do get in that gray area, it's really hard to pinpoint your value. So thank you for stating that. You are also leading a session for the Second First membership. Tell us a little bit about what members can expect.
I'm very excited about this. So in my free time, not that I have much free time.
So much free time.
So much free time.
Yes. This is why I thought you were a D. I was like, you have to be, there's no way you're an S.
I'm not a D, but I'm an Enneagram type 3. So I'm a super high achiever.
Okay. Now it makes sense.
Yes,
Thank you.
There you go. So in my free time, I also founded a membership community called the Helm in Charleston. It's a community for executive mothers who don't want to choose between ambitions and motherhood. So I have created a framework for them called the Matriarch chart, CHART, that I teach them how to show up holistically as mothers and leaders, no matter what role they're filling at that second of the day. I'm going to teach that Matriarch chart, but framing it towards, it doesn't take much changing at all, but framing it towards husband and wife partners that work together in the business. CHART stands for, it's to chart your course towards being an intentional, holistic leader. CHART stands for clear vision, making sure the vision aligns between you and your spouse or CEO. Building a high-performing team is the H. Aligned values, which we talked on earlier about aligning those core values in both spaces, in both roles. Road markers, so making sure you're really intentional about mapping out your goals, having road markers in place so you can really work backwards, make sure you're achieving your goals. And the biggest one is T, is time intentionality, making sure that you are really using your time in both in your organization and with your family to make it the most impactful you can. So I'm going to work through that chart framework and help people make sure that they are on a course that is the course that they want in life, in business, in marriage, in their organization, as a parent, as a leader in both areas. So that's what's going to be coming.
Isn't it amazing that we put so much time and effort into strategic, thoughtful planning of business, but not our life as a whole?
Absolutely. It's crazy. Like you can't have your vision for your organization can't be scaling at 25, 50% every year, but then also want to scale back on your life. Like it has to align, and you have to be just as strategic and intentional about your life as well. It doesn't just happen. Maybe it happens by luck every now and then, but long-term success doesn't happen by accident. It is designed. You know where you're going. You know where you're headed. You know how to chart your course. You know where you need to check in on the way. You know who you need help to get you there. You've got to have your guardrails through your values that are going to keep you on track to make sure you're making right decisions. It all happens intentionally. And a lot of people forget that.
I'm so excited for that session. And I think that will help a lot of executives not set themselves up for failure and disappointment, because I think we're so hard on ourselves too, because we, like you said, we set these big goals with our entrepreneur or our CEO, like we're going to grow 15% this year. Oh, and I also made my New Year's resolution to cook dinner at home every night and go to the gym 4 nights a week and spend more time with my kids.
Setting yourself up for failure.
100%. So thank you for doing that. I'm thrilled. So you mentioned the Helm. How can listeners contact you for either more information on what we talked about or more information on the Helm?
So if you want to know more about our business and how we operate in our culture, you can go to www.lccm.com. You can find my personal website, www.chiefmatriarch.com. And then on that site, you will find all information about me and what I'm doing. And then also you can find any information about the Helm and all the cool things that we're doing over there for executive mothers in Charleston.
Thank you so much.
So thankful for the opportunity. You're doing such good work, and it's a privilege to have this conversation with you.
To find show notes and links for anything mentioned in this episode, visit secondverse.com/42. Be sure to subscribe to catch future episodes and leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Remember, you don't have to navigate being a second in command alone when you have the right hand roadmap.